Jeffrey Edward Epstein was an American sex offender and financier. Epstein, who was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York City, began his professional life by teaching at the Dalton School in Manhattan, despite lacking a college degree. After his dismissal from the school, he entered the banking and finance sector, working at Bear Stearns in various roles. He eventually started his own firm. Epstein developed an elite social circle and procured many women and children. He and associates then sexually abused them. In 2005, police in Palm Beach, Florida, began investigating Epstein after a parent reported that he had sexually abused her 14-year-old daughter. Epstein pleaded guilty and was convicted in 2008 by a Florida state court of procuring a child for prostitution and of soliciting a prostitute. He served almost 13 months in custody, but with extensive work release. He was convicted of only these 2 crimes as part of a controversial plea deal. Federal officials had identified 36 girls, some as young as 14 years old, whom Epstein had allegedly sexually abused. Epstein was arrested again on July 6, 2019, on federal charges for the sex trafficking of minors in Florida and New York. He died in his jail cell on August 10, 2019. The medical examiner ruled the death a suicide. Epstein's lawyers have disputed the ruling, and there has been significant public skepticism about the true cause of his death, resulting in numerous conspiracy theories. Since Epstein's death precluded the possibility of pursuing criminal charges against him, a judge dismissed all criminal charges on August 29, 2019. Epstein had a decades-long association with the British socialite Ghislaine Maxwell, leading to her 2021 conviction on U.S. federal charges of sex trafficking and conspiracy for helping him procure girls, including a 14-year-old, for child sexual abuse and prostitution. Early life. Epstein was born in 1953 in the Brooklyn borough of New York City. His parents Pauline and Seymour G. Epstein were Jewish and had married in 1952 shortly before his birth. Pauline worked as a school aide and was a homemaker. Seymour Epstein worked for the New York City Department of Parks and Recreation as a groundskeeper and gardener. Jeffrey was the older of 2 siblings. He and his brother Mark grew up in the working-class neighborhood of Seagate, a private gated community in Coney Island, Brooklyn. Epstein attended local public schools, first attending Public School 188, and then Mark Twain Junior High School nearby. In 1967, Epstein attended the National Music Camp at the Interlochen Center for the Arts. He began playing the piano when he was 5. He graduated in 1969 from Lafayette High School at age 16, having skipped 2 grades. Later that year, he attended classes at Cooper Union until he changed colleges in 1971. From September 1971, he attended the Courant Institute of Mathematical Sciences at New York University, but left without receiving a degree in June 1974. Career. Teaching. Epstein started working in September 1974 as a physics and mathematics teacher for teens at the Dalton School on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. Donald Barr, who served as the headmaster until June 1974, was known to have made several unconventional recruitments at the time, although it is unclear whether he had a direct role in hiring Epstein. 3 months after Barr's departure, Epstein began to teach at the school, despite his lack of credentials. Epstein allegedly showed inappropriate behavior toward underage students at the time. He became acquainted with Alan Greenberg, the chief executive officer of Bear Stearns, whose son and daughter were attending the school. Greenberg's daughter, Lynn Copel, pointed to a parent-teacher conference where Epstein influenced another Dalton parent into advocating for him to Greenberg. In June 1976, after Epstein was dismissed from Dalton for poor performance, Greenberg offered him a job at Bear Stearns. Banking. Epstein joined Bear Stearns in 1976 as a low-level junior assistant to a floor trader. He swiftly moved up to become an options trader, working in the special products division, and then advised the bank's wealthiest clients, such as Seagram President Edgar Bronfman, on tax mitigation strategies. Jimmy Kane, the bank's later chief executive officer, praised Epstein's skill with wealthy clients and complex products. In 1980, 4 years after joining Bear Stearns, Epstein became a limited partner. In 1981, Epstein was asked to leave Bear Stearns for, according to his sworn testimony, being guilty of a Reg D violation. Even though Epstein departed abruptly, he remained close to Kane and Greenberg and was a client of Bear Stearns until its collapse in 2008. Financial consulting. In August 1981, Epstein founded his own consulting firm, Intercontinental Assets Group Incorporated, which assisted clients in recovering stolen money from fraudulent brokers and lawyers. Epstein described his work at this time as being a high-level bounty hunter. He told friends that he worked sometimes as a consultant for governments and the very wealthy to recover embezzled funds, while at other times he worked for clients who had embezzled funds. Spanish actress and heiress Ana Obregón was one such wealthy client, whom Epstein helped in 1982 to recover her father's millions in lost investments, which had disappeared when Drysdale government securities collapsed because of fraud. Epstein also stated to some people at the time that he was an intelligence agent. During the 1980s, Epstein possessed an Austrian passport that had his photo, but with a false name. The passport showed his place of residence in Saudi Arabia. In 2017, a former senior White House official reported that Alexander Acosta, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida who had handled Epstein's criminal case in 2008, had stated to Trump transition interviewers, that "I was told Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone, and that Epstein was above his pay grade." During this period, one of Epstein's clients was the Saudi Arabian businessman Adnan Khashoggi, who was the middleman in transferring American weapons from Israel to Iran, as part of the Iran-Contra affair in the 1980s. Khashoggi was one of several defense contractors that he knew. In the mid-1980s, Epstein traveled multiple times between the United States, Europe, and Southwest Asia. While in London, Epstein met Stephen Hoffenberg. They had been introduced through Douglas Leese, a defense contractor, and John Mitchell, the former U.S. Attorney General. Towers Financial Corporation. Stephen Hoffenberg hired Epstein in 1987, as a consultant for Towers Financial Corporation, a collection agency that bought debts people owed to hospitals, banks, and phone companies. Hoffenberg set Epstein up in offices in the Villard houses in Manhattan and paid him $25,000 per month for his consulting work. Hoffenberg and Epstein then refashioned themselves as corporate raiders using Towers Financial as their raiding vessel. One of Epstein's first assignments for Hoffenberg was to implement what turned out to be an unsuccessful bid to take over Pan American World Airways in 1987. A similar unsuccessful bid in 1988 was made to take over Emory Air Freight Corp. During this period, Hoffenberg and Epstein worked closely together and traveled everywhere on Hoffenberg's private jet. In 1993, Towers Financial Corporation imploded when it was revealed as being one of the biggest Ponzi schemes in American history, losing its investors over $450 million. In court documents, Hoffenberg claimed that Epstein was intimately involved in the scheme. Epstein left the company by 1989 and was never charged for being involved with the massive investor fraud committed. It is unknown if Epstein acquired any stolen funds from the Towers Ponzi scheme. Financial management firm. In 1988, while Epstein was still consulting for Hoffenberg, he founded his financial management firm, J. Epstein & Company. The company was said by Epstein to have been formed to manage the assets of clients with more than $1 billion in net worth, although others have expressed skepticism that he was restrictive of the clients that he took. The only publicly known billionaire client of Epstein was Leslie Wexner, chairman and CEO of L Brands and Victoria's Secret. In 1986, Epstein met Wexner through their mutual acquaintances, insurance executive Robert Meister and his wife, in Palm Beach, Florida. A year later, Epstein became Wexner's financial advisor and served as his right-hand man. Within the year, Epstein had sorted out Wexner's entangled finances. In July 1991, Wexner granted Epstein full power of attorney over his affairs. The power of attorney allowed Epstein to hire people, sign checks, buy and sell properties, borrow money, and do anything else of a legally binding nature on Wexner's behalf. By 1995, Epstein was a director of the Wexner Foundation and Wexner Heritage Foundation. He was also the president of Wexner's Property, which developed part of the town of New Albany outside Columbus, Ohio, where Wexner lived. Epstein made millions in fees by managing Wexner's financial affairs. Although never employed by L Brands, he frequently corresponded with the company executives. Epstein often attended Victoria's Secret fashion shows, and hosted the models at his New York City home, as well as helping aspiring models get work with the company. In 1996, Epstein changed the name of his firm to the Financial Trust Company and, for tax advantages, based it on the island of St. Thomas in the U.S. Virgin Islands. By relocating to the U.S. Virgin Islands, Epstein was able to reduce federal income taxes by 90%. The U.S. Virgin Islands acted as an offshore tax haven, while at the same time offering the advantages of being part of the United States banking system. Media activities. In 2003, Epstein bid to acquire New York Magazine. Other bidders included advertising executive Donny Deutsch, investor Nelson Peltz, media mogul and New York Daily News publisher Mortimer Zuckerman, and film producer Harvey Weinstein. The ultimate buyer was Bruce Wasserstein, a longtime Wall Street investment banker, who paid $55 million. In 2004. Epstein and Zuckerman committed up to $25 million to finance Radar, a celebrity and pop culture magazine founded by Meir Roshan. Epstein and Zuckerman were equal partners in the venture. Roshan, as its editor-in-chief, retained a small ownership stake. It folded after 3 issues as a print publication and became exclusively an online one. Liquid Funding Ltd. Epstein was the president of the company Liquid Funding Limited between 2000 and 2007. The company was an early pioneer in expanding the kind of debt that could be accepted on repurchase, or the repo market, which involves a lender giving money to a borrower in exchange for securities that the borrower then agrees to buy back at an agreed-upon later time and price. The innovation of liquid funding, and other early companies, was that instead of having stocks and bonds as the underlying securities, it had commercial mortgages and investment-grade residential mortgages bundled into complex securities as the underlying security. Liquid funding was initially 40% owned by Bear Stearns. Through the help of the credit rating agencies Standard & Poor's, Fitch Ratings and Moody's Investors Service, the new bundled securities were able to be created for companies so that they got a gold-plated AAA rating. The implosion of such complex securities, because of their inaccurate ratings, led to the collapse of Bear Stearns in March 2008 and set in motion the financial crisis of 2007-2008 and the subsequent Great Recession. If liquid funding were left holding large amounts of such securities as collateral, it could have lost large amounts of money. Investments. Hedge funds. Israeli startup. Video recordings. Epstein installed concealed cameras in numerous places on his properties to allegedly record sexual activity with underage girls by prominent people for criminal purposes such as blackmail. Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's long-term girlfriend and companion, told a friend that Epstein's private island in the Virgin Islands was completely wired for video, and the friend believed that Maxwell and Epstein were videotaping everyone on the island as an insurance policy. When police raided his Palm Beach residence in 2006, 2 hidden pinhole cameras were discovered in his home. It was also reported that Epstein's mansion in New York was wired extensively with a video surveillance system. Maria Farmer, an artist who worked for Epstein in 1996, noted that Epstein showed her a media room in the New York mansion where there were individuals monitoring the pinhole cameras throughout the house. The media room was accessed through a hidden door. She stated that in the media room there were men sitting here. And I looked on the cameras, and I saw toilet, bed, toilet, bed. She added that it was very obvious that they were, monitoring private moments. Epstein allegedly lent girls to powerful people to ingratiate himself with them and also to gain possible blackmail information. According to the Department of Justice, he kept compact discs locked in his safe in his New York mansion with handwritten labels that included the description, Young Plus. Epstein implied that he had blackmail material when he told a New York Times reporter in 2018, off the record, that he had dirt on powerful people, including information about their sexual proclivities and recreational drug use. Legal proceedings. First criminal case. Initial developments. Non-prosecution agreement. Conviction and sentencing. Reactions. Civil cases. I. Jane Does v. Epstein/I. None. Victims' rights. I. Jane Does v. United States/I. None. I. Virginia Giuffre v. Epstein/I. None. I. Virginia Giuffre v. Ghislaine Maxwell/I. None. I. Jane Doe v. Epstein and Trump/I. None. I. Sarah Ransom v. Epstein and Maxwell/I. None. I. Bradley Edwards defamation v. Epstein/I. None. I. Maria Farmer v. Epstein and Maxwell/I. None. I. Jennifer Arrayas v. Epstein and Maxwell/I. None. I. Caitlin Doe, et.al. v. Epstein's estate/I. None. I. Jane Doe v. Epstein's estate/I. None. I. Teresa Helm, et.al. v. Epstein's estate/I. None. I. Jane Doe 15 v. Epstein's estate/I. None. I. Tila Davies v. Epstein's estate/I. None. I. Jane Does 1-9 v. Epstein's estate/I. None. I. J. Doe v. Epstein's estate/I. None. I. U.S. Virgin Islands v. Epstein's estate, et.al/I. None. I. Jane Doe v. Maxwell and Epstein's estate/I. None. I. Jane Does v. Epstein estate/I. None. I. Jane Doe v. Epstein estate/I. None. I. Kelly Brennan v. Epstein estate/I. None. I. Jane Doe v. Epstein estate/I. None. Second criminal case. Sex trafficking charges. Investigation in France. On August 23, 2019, the prosecutor's office in Paris, France, opened a preliminary investigation into Epstein. He is being investigated for rape and sexual assault of minors under and over the age of 15, criminal association with a view to committing crimes, and association with criminals with a view to committing offenses. The prosecutors said that the goal of the investigation is to find possible crimes committed in France and elsewhere against French citizens. Personal life. Previous long-term girlfriends associated with Epstein include Eva Anderson Dubin and publishing heiress Ghislaine Maxwell. Epstein was romantically linked to Anderson Dubin for an 11-year period, mostly in the 1980s, and the two later remained friendly well after her marriage to Glenn Dubin. Epstein met Maxwell, daughter of disgraced media baron Robert Maxwell, by 1991. Epstein had Maxwell come to the United States in 1991 to recover from her grief following the death of her father. Maxwell was implicated by several of Epstein's accusers as procuring or recruiting underage girls in addition to once being Epstein's girlfriend. In a 2009 deposition, several of Epstein's household employees testified that Maxwell had a central role in both his public and private life, referring to her as his main girlfriend who also handled the hiring, supervising, and firing of staff starting around 1992. In 1995, Epstein renamed one of his companies the Ghislaine Corporation in Palm Beach, Florida. The company was dissolved in 1998. In 2000, Maxwell moved into a 7,000 square foot townhouse, less than 10 blocks from Epstein's New York mansion. This townhome was purchased for $4.95 million by an anonymous limited liability company, with an address that matches the office of J. Epstein & Co. Representing the buyer was Darren and Dyke, Epstein's longtime lawyer. In a 2003 Vanity Fair expose, Epstein refers to Maxwell as my best friend. Epstein was a longtime acquaintance of Prince Andrew and Tom Barrack, and attended parties with many prominent people, including Bill Clinton, George Stephanopoulos, Donald Trump, Katie Couric, Woody Allen, and Harvey Weinstein. His contacts included Rupert Murdoch, Michael Bloomberg, Richard Branson, Michael Jackson, Alec Baldwin, and the Kennedys. His contacts also included Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak, British Prime Minister Tony Blair, and Saudi Arabian Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Both Clinton and Trump claimed that they never visited Epstein's island. Epstein was associated with former Trump chief strategist Steve Bannon. According to Michael Wolff, Bannon and Epstein were introduced in December 2017. Bannon met with Epstein several times at his mansion in New York. Also according to Wolff, Bannon coached Epstein for a 60 Minutes interview which never occurred. A New York Times article reported that Bill Gates's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein started in 2011, just a few years after Epstein's conviction, and continued for some years. In August 2021, Gates said the reason he had meetings with Epstein was because Gates hoped Epstein could provide money for philanthropic work, though nothing came of the idea. Gates added, "It was a huge mistake to spend time with him, to give him the credibility of being there." Epstein owned a private Boeing 727 jet and traveled in it frequently, logging 600 flying hours a year, usually with guests on board. The jet was nicknamed the Lolita Express by the locals in the Virgin Islands, because of its frequent arrivals at Little St. James with apparently underage girls. In 2003, Epstein flew to Cuba aboard his plane with Colombian President Andrés Pastrana Arango at the invitation of Cuban President Fidel Castro. According to Fabiola Santiago of the Miami Herald, Epstein was likely considering relocating to Cuba in order to escape U.S. law enforcement. Epstein was under investigation from U.S. law enforcement at the time. In 2009, Epstein's brother Mark claimed Trump had flown on Epstein's plane at least once. He later told The Washington Post that Trump flew numerous times on Epstein's airplane, although Mark was present on only one of the flights. According to Michael Corcoran, Trump flew Epstein on his own airplane at least once. In September 2002, Epstein flew Clinton, Kevin Spacey, and Chris Tucker to Africa in this jet. Flight records obtained in 2016 show Bill Clinton flew 27 times to at least a dozen international locations. Flight logs did not list any Secret Service detail for at least 5 flights, on an Asia trip, and Secret Service stated that there is no evidence of the former president making a trip to Epstein's private island. In 2019, a Clinton spokesperson stated that, in 2002 and 2003, Clinton took 4 trips on Epstein's airplane, making stops on 3 continents, all with his staff and Secret Service detail. At the time of Epstein's 2019 arrest, Clinton's spokeswoman Angel Urena stated that Clinton had not spoken to Epstein in well over a decade, and has never been to Little St. James Island, Epstein's ranch in New Mexico, or his residence in Florida. In a profile of Epstein in New York Magazine in 2002, former Democratic Senate leader George J. Mitchell said of Epstein, "I would certainly call him a friend and a supporter." In the same article, Donald Trump remarked, "I've known Jeff for 15 years. Terrific guy. He's a lot of fun to be with. It is even said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side. No doubt about it, Jeffrey enjoys his social life." In July 2019, Trump said, "I knew him like everybody in Palm Beach knew him," stating 4 times he had not been a fan of Epstein and that he had not spoken to him in about 15 years. A video shot in 1992 surfaced showing the 2 men partying together at Mar-a-Lago. By 2007, Trump reportedly banned Epstein from his Mar-a-Lago club for unseemly pursuit of young females. The ban allegation was included in court documents filed by attorney Bradley Edwards, although Edwards later said it was a rumor he tried to, but could not, confirm. In 2002, a spokesman of Bill Clinton lauded Epstein as a committed philanthropist with insights and generosity. At the time, Epstein was on the board of Rockefeller University, a member of the Trilateral Commission and the Council on Foreign Relations, and was a major donor to Harvard University. Epstein visited the White House while Clinton was president on 4 known occasions. In 1993, he went to a donor event at the White House with his companion Ghislaine Maxwell. Around the same time, he also met with President Clinton's aide Mark Middleton on at least 3 occasions at the White House. In 1995, financier Lynn Forrester discussed Jeffrey Epstein and currency stabilization with Clinton. Epstein, according to his own accounts, was heavily involved in the foreign exchange market and traded large amounts of currency in the unregulated forex market. In 1995, Epstein also attended a small political fundraiser dinner for Bill Clinton which included 14 other people including Ron Perlman, Don Johnson, Jimmy Buffett, and dinner organizer Paul Prosperi. From the 1990s to mid-2000s, Epstein often socialized with the future President Donald Trump. Author Michael Wolff wrote that Trump, Epstein, and Tom Barrack were at the time like a set of nightlife musketeers on the social scene. Epstein and Trump socialized both in New York City and Palm Beach, where they both had houses. In April 2003, New York Magazine reported Epstein hosted a dinner party in his Manhattan residence to honor Bill Clinton, who did not attend, although Trump did attend. According to the Washington Post, one person who knew Epstein and Trump during this time noted that they were tight and they were each other's wingmen. In November 2004, Epstein and Trump's friendship ran into trouble when they became embroiled in a bidding war for a $40 million mansion, Maison de l'Amity, which was being auctioned in Palm Beach. Trump won the auction for $41 million, and successfully sold the property 4 years later for $95 million to the Russian billionaire Dmitry Rybolovlev. That month was the last time Epstein and Trump were recorded to have interacted. Wealth. The exact origin of Epstein's wealth is unknown. Leslie Wexner was one source of Epstein's original wealth. An assistant of Epstein also stated that he got his fortune started through Robert Maxwell, the media mogul father of Ghislaine Maxwell. When Epstein pleaded guilty in 2008 to soliciting and procuring prostitution, his lawyers stated he was a billionaire with a net worth of over $1 billion. A number of sources, however, have questioned the extent of Epstein's wealth and his status as a billionaire. According to an article in the New York Times, his fortune may be more illusion than fact. Epstein lost large sums of money in the 2008 financial crisis, and friends and patrons including retail billionaire Leslie Wexner, deserted him following his pleading guilty to prostitution charges in 2008. New York Magazine claimed that there's scant proof of Epstein's financial bona fides, and Forbes also ran an article entitled Why Sex Offender Jeffrey Epstein is Not a Billionaire. Spencer Coven, an attorney for 3 of Epstein's alleged victims in the case where Epstein pleaded guilty to sexual activity with minors, stated that he and his team pursued every possible angle to find out Epstein's net worth but found that much of his wealth is offshore. An investigation by the Miami Herald of the Swiss leaks documents indicated that Epstein had multiple financial accounts with millions of dollars in offshore tax havens. In the Paradise Papers, records showed that Epstein in February 1997 became a client of Appleby, a Bermuda-based law firm which specialized in the creation of offshore companies and investment vehicles for the ultra-wealthy. A client profile of Epstein described his job cryptically as the manager of fortune. Federal prosecutors on July 12, 2019, stated in court documents that, based on records from one financial institution, Jeffrey Epstein was extravagantly wealthy and had assets worth at least $500 million and earned more than $10 million a year. The extent of his wealth, however, was not known, since he had not filled out a financial affidavit for his bail application. According to Bloomberg News, today, so little is known about Epstein's current business or clients that the only things that can be valued with any certainty are his properties. The Miami Herald in their investigation of the Paradise Papers and Swiss leaks documents concluded that Epstein's wealth is likely spread secretly across the globe. In 2020, Epstein Estate's finances revealed that it had paid out nearly $50 million between June 2020 and December 2020 to more than 100 women who brought claims to the Epstein Victims Compensation Fund set up in the U.S. Virgin Islands. By February 2021, the estate was valued at about $240 million, down from estimates of $630 million a year earlier. This prompted the Attorney General of the U.S. Virgin Islands, Denise George, to file an emergency motion seeking the immediate asset freeze. She contended in the court filing, which the victims joined, that the estate executors had mismanaged the money. Residences. Epstein owned the Herbert N. Strauss House on 9 East 71st Street in the Upper East Side of Manhattan in New York City. It was originally purchased for $13.2 million in 1989 by Epstein's mentor, Leigh Wexner, who renovated it completely. Epstein moved into the mansion in 1995 after Wexner married and moved with his wife to Columbus, Ohio, to raise their family. He took full possession of the mansion in 1998, when he paid Wexner $20 million for it. The house was valued in 2019 by federal prosecutors at $77 million, while the city assessed its value at $56 million. The mansion is reputedly the largest private residence in Manhattan at 21,000 square feet. Hidden under a flight of stairs, there is a lead-lined bathroom fitted with its own closed-circuit television screens and a telephone, both concealed in a cabinet under the sink. The house also has its own heated sidewalk to melt away the snow. The entrance hall is lined with rows of individually framed prosthetic eyeballs that were made in England for injured soldiers. The financier's other properties include a residence in Palm Beach, Florida, purchased in 1990, 7 units in an apartment building near the Arc de Triomphe at 22 Avenue Foch in Paris, France, a 7,500-acre ranch named Zorro Ranch near Stanley, New Mexico, purchased in 1993, a private island near St. Thomas in the U.S. Virgin Islands called Little St. James, which includes a mansion and guest houses, purchased in 1998, and the neighboring island of Great St. James purchased in 2016. Epstein was building a compound on the latter including an amphitheater and underwater office and pool but ran into problems when a stop work order was issued in late 2018. Work continued despite the order. Epstein, previous to his final Manhattan home, lived in a spacious townhouse, which was a former Iranian government building that had been taken over by the State Department during the Iranian Revolution, at 34 East 69th Street for a rate of $15,000 a month from 1992 to 1995. He also previously owned a mansion outside Columbus, Ohio, near Wexner's home from 1992 to 1998, which he purchased from his mentor. Before the Herbert Strauss house was purchased, Wexner purchased in 1988 the adjacent townhouse at 11 East 71st Street. Like in the case of the 9 East 71st Street house, Epstein was on the deed of the 11 East 71st Street house. American Samoa the trustee. The townhouse was sold in 1996 to the Comet Trust, which holds part of the assets of the de Gunsberg/Bronfman family. Epstein rented offices for his business dealings in the Villard House at 457 Madison Avenue. Stephen Hoffenberg originally set up the offices for Epstein in 1987 when he was consulting for Tower Financial. Epstein used these offices until at least 2003. Around this time, Michael Wolff saw the financier in his office, which in the past were the offices of Random House. Wolff noted that Epstein's offices were a strange place which did not have a corporate feel at all. Wolff stated that the offices were almost European. It's old-fashioned, unrehabbed in its way. Wolff continued that the trading floor is filled with guys in yarmulkes. Who they are, I have no idea. They're like a throwback, a bunch of guys from the 50s. So here is Jeffrey in this incredibly beautiful office, with pieces of art and a view of the courtyard, and he seems like the most relaxed guy in the world. You want to say what's going on here, and he gives you that Cheshire smile. Epstein rented multiple apartment units for his employees, models, and guests since the 1990s at 301 East 66th Street. The majority of the apartment complex at this address is owned by Asa Properties, which is owned by Jeffrey Epstein's brother, Mark, who purchased the complex in the early 1990s from Wexner. Over the years, Epstein has housed different friends at 11 East 71st Street, including his ex-girlfriend Eva Anderson, who is now married to his hedge fund friend Glenn Dubin, MC2 Models founder Jean-Luc Brunel, and on occasions former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak. He has housed some of his workers, including his pilot, housekeeper, and office work staff, in the apartment complex. Epstein has also housed underage girls, who Brunel scouted for his MC2 modeling agency. On August 6, 2012, a model and party promoter associated with MC2, Pedro Gaspar, who lived above another of the modeling agency's locations in Manhattan, died of what some consider to be a suspicious drug overdose. Political donations. From 1989 until 2003, Epstein donated more than $139,000 to U.S. Democratic Party federal candidates and committees and over $18,000 to U.S. Republican Party candidates and groups. Epstein contributed $50,000 to Democrat Bill Richardson's successful campaign for governor of New Mexico in 2002 and again for his successful run for re-election in 2006. Also that year, he contributed $15,000 to Democrat Gary King's successful campaign for Attorney General of New Mexico. He later contributed $35,000 to King's 2014 unsuccessful campaign for governor. Other contributions in New Mexico included Epstein $10,000 toward Jim Baca's campaign to become head of the Land Commission and $2,000 toward Santa Fe County Sheriff Jim Solano's bid for re-election. In 2010, Epstein received a notice from New Mexico Department of Public Safety which said, "You are not required to register with the state of New Mexico." This was in contravention of federal law, which would seem to say that the conviction in Florida required him to register in New Mexico. Philanthropy. In 1991, Epstein was one of 4 donors who pledged to raise $2 million for a Hillel student building Rosovsky Hall at Harvard University. In 2000, Epstein established the Jeffrey Epstein Six Foundation, which funds science research and education. Prior to 2003, the foundation funded Martin Nowak's research at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, New Jersey. In May 2003, Epstein pledged a series of donations totaling $30 million to create a mathematical biology and evolutionary dynamics program at Harvard which was run by Martin Nowak. According to the Boston Globe, the actual amount received from Epstein was $6.5 million. In 2019, Forbes deleted a 2013 article that called Epstein one of the largest backers of cutting-edge science after the New York Times revealed its author, Drew Hendricks, had been paid $600 to submit it falsely as his own. According to attorney Gerald B. Lefcourt, Epstein was part of the original group that conceived of the Clinton Global Initiative. Epstein's CO organized a science event with illusionist and skeptic Al Seckel called the Mind Shift Conference. The conference took place in 2010 on Epstein's private island Little St. James. In attendance were scientists Murray Gell-Mann, Leonard Mlodinow, and Gerald J. Sussman. The true extent of Epstein's donations is unknown. The Jeffrey Epstein Six Foundation fails to disclose information which other charities routinely disclose. Concerns have been raised over this lack of transparency. In 2015, the Attorney General of the state of New York was reported to be trying to gain information but was refused since the charities were based outside of the state and did not solicit in New York State. Epstein, besides making donations through the Jeffrey Epstein Six Foundation, also made a number of charitable donations through his 3 private charities, Epstein Interest, the COUQ Foundation, and Gratitude American Ltd. According to federal tax filings, Epstein donated $30 million between 1998 and 2018, through these 3 charities. Following his death, a number of scientists and institutions including Harvard University and Massachusetts Institute of Technology came under criticism for accepting money from Epstein and his foundation, with some individuals offering to give away money donated by Epstein. Interest in eugenics and transhumanism. According to various sources, beginning in the early 2000s, Epstein developed a strong interest in improving the human race through genetic engineering and artificial intelligence, including using his own sperm. He addressed the scientific community at various events and occasions and communicated his fascination with eugenics. It was reported in August 2019 that Epstein had planned to seed the human race with his DNA by impregnating up to 20 women at a time using his New Mexico compound as a baby ranch, where mothers would give birth to his offspring. He was an advocate of cryonics and his own idiosyncratic version of transhumanism, and had said that he intended to have his penis and head frozen. Kathleen Hall Jamieson, director of the Annenberg Public Policy Center at the University of Pennsylvania, said, "Scientists need funding for important work. If the funding is for legitimate scientific work, there is nothing wrong with accepting support from a billionaire. However, it would have been wrong for scientists to accept his funding if they were aware that he was planning a eugenics experiment that might draw legitimacy from his association with them." Professor George Church also publicly apologized for meeting Epstein after his 13-month sentence, saying there should have been more conversations about, should we be doing this? Should we be helping this guy? There was just a lot of nerd tunnel vision. Death. On July 23, 2019, Epstein was found injured and semi-conscious at 1:30 a.m. on the floor of his cell, with marks around his neck. His cellmate, former New York City police officer Nicholas Tartaglione, who was awaiting trial for 4 counts of murder, was questioned about Epstein's condition. He denied having any knowledge of what happened. Epstein said he believed that he was attacked by his cellmate, while the correctional staff suspected attempted suicide. According to NBC News, 2 sources said that Epstein might have tried to hang himself, a third said the injuries were not serious and could have been staged, and a 4th source said that an assault by his cellmate had not been ruled out. After that incident, he was placed on suicide watch. 6 days later, on July 29, 2019, Epstein was taken off suicide watch and placed in a special housing unit with another inmate. Epstein's close associates said he was in good spirits. When Epstein was placed in the special housing unit, the jail informed the Justice Department that he would have a cellmate, and that a guard would look into the cell every 30 minutes. These procedures were not followed on the night of his death. On August 9, 2019, Epstein's cellmate was transferred out, but no one took his place. Later in the evening, contrary to the jail's normal procedure, Epstein was not checked every 30 minutes. The 2 guards who were assigned to check his jail unit that night fell asleep and did not check on him for about 3 hours. The guards falsified related records. 2 cameras in front of Epstein's cell also malfunctioned that night. Epstein was found dead in his cell at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in New York City at 6:30 a.m. EDT on August 10, 2019. The Bureau of Prisons said life-saving measures were initiated immediately upon the discovery of Epstein's body. Emergency responders were called and he was taken to a hospital. On August 10, 2019, the Bureau of Prisons and U.S. Attorney General William Barr called the death an apparent suicide, although no final determination had been made. The circumstances leading up to his death are being investigated by the United States Department of Justice. Autopsy. On August 11, 2019, an autopsy was performed. It appeared likely that Epstein had thrown himself violently off the cell's top bunk, which would explain the damage he suffered, other than strangulation. The preliminary result of the autopsy found that Epstein sustained multiple breaks in his neck bones. Among the bones broken in Epstein's neck was the hyoid bone. Such breaks of the hyoid bone can occur from those who hang themselves, but they are more common in victims of homicide by strangulation. A 2010 study found broken hyoids in 25% of cases of hangings. A larger study conducted from 2010 to 2016 found hyoid damage in just 16 of 264, or 6%, of cases of hangings. Hyoid bone breaks become more common with age, as the bones become more brittle. Forensic pathologist Cyril Wecht noted that hanging by leaning forward would not result in broken cervical bones. On August 16, 2019, Barbara Sampson, the New York City medical examiner, ruled Epstein's death a suicide by hanging. The medical examiner, according to Epstein's defense counsel, only saw 9 minutes of footage from one security camera to help her arrive at her conclusion. Epstein's defense lawyers were not satisfied with the conclusion of the medical examiner and were conducting their own independent investigation into the cause of Epstein's death, including taking legal action, if necessary, to view the pivotal camera footage near his cell during the night of his death. Epstein's lawyers said that the evidence concerning Epstein's death was far more consistent with murder than suicide. Michael Bodden, an independent pathologist hired by the Epstein estate, observed the autopsy. In October 2019, Dr. Bodden said that Mr. Epstein, 66, experienced a number of injuries, among them a broken bone in his neck, that are extremely unusual in suicidal hangings and could occur much more commonly in homicidal strangulation. Bodden stated that he thinks that the evidence points to homicide rather than suicide. Final will. On August 18, 2019, it was reported that Jeffrey Epstein had signed his last will and testament on August 8, 2019, 2 weeks after being found injured in his cell and 2 days before his death. Until this time, Epstein had been depositing money in other inmates' commissary accounts to avoid being attacked. The signing of the will was witnessed by 2 attorneys that knew him. The will named 2 longtime employees as executors, and immediately gifted all of his assets, and any assets remaining in his estate, to a trust. Burial. Following the autopsy, Epstein's body was claimed by his brother Mark. On September 5, 2019, Epstein's body was buried in an unmarked grave next to those of his parents at the I.J. Morris Star of David Cemetery in Palm Beach, Florida. The names of his parents were also removed from their tombstone in order to prevent vandalism. Investigations. Attorney General Barr ordered an investigation by the Department of Justice Inspector General in addition to the investigation by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, saying that he was appalled by Epstein's death in federal custody. 2 days later, Barr said there had been serious irregularities in the prison's handling of Epstein, promising we will get to the bottom of what happened, and there will be accountability. On August 14, 2019, Manhattan Federal Court Judge Richard M. Berman, who was overseeing Epstein's criminal case, wrote to the Metropolitan Correctional Center Warden Lawmine Ndie inquiring as to whether an investigation into the millionaire's apparent suicide would include a probe into his prior injuries. Judge Berman wrote that to his knowledge it has never been definitely explained what they concluded about the incident. The national president of the Council of Prison Local C-33, E.O. Young, stated that prisons can't ever stop anyone who is persistent on killing themselves. Between 2010 and 2016, around 124 inmates killed themselves while in federal custody, or around 20 prisoners per year, out of an inmate population of 180,000. The previous reported inmate suicide in the MCC facility in Manhattan was in 1998. The union leader Young said it was unclear if there was video of Epstein's hanging or direct observations by jail officials. He said that while cameras are ubiquitous in the facility, he did not believe that the interior of inmates' cells were within their range. Young said union officials had long been raising concerns regarding staffing, as the Trump administration had imposed a hiring freeze and budget cuts on the Federal Bureau of Prisons, adding all this was caused by the administration. President Serene Gregg, of the American Federation of Government Employees Local 3148, said MCC is functioning with fewer than 70% of the needed correctional officers, forcing many to work mandatory overtime and 60 to 70-hour work weeks. In previous congressional testimony, Attorney General Barr admitted the BOP was short about 4,000 to 5,000 employees. He had lifted the freeze and was working to recruit sufficient new officers to replace those who had departed. Epstein's attorneys asked Judge Berman to probe their client's death, alleging they could provide evidence that the incident resulting in his death was far more consistent with assault than suicide. 1 week after having signed his final will, it had been reported that at least one camera in the hallway outside Epstein's cell had footage that was unusable, although other usable footage was recorded in the area. 2 cameras that malfunctioned in front of Epstein's cell were sent to an FBI crime lab for examination. Federal prosecutors subpoenaed up to 20 correctional officers concerning the cause of Epstein's death. On November 19, 2019, federal prosecutors in New York charged Metropolitan Correctional Center guards Michael Thomas and Tova Noel with creating false records, and with conspiracy, after video footage obtained by prosecutors revealed that Epstein had, against regulation, been in his cell unchecked for 8 hours prior to being found dead. On May 22, 2021, the 2 guards admitted they falsified records but were spared from any time behind bars under a deal with federal prosecutors. As part of a deferred prosecution agreement, on May 25, both officers pleaded guilty to falsifying records and conspiracy to defraud the United States. They were sentenced to 6 months supervisory release and will be required to perform 100 hours of community service. In popular culture, Epstein's death became the subject of widespread controversy and debate, with the belief that his death was a homicide becoming a popular meme. HBO is creating a limited series on Epstein's life and death to be directed and executive produced by Adam McKay. Sony Pictures Television is additionally developing mini-series based on Epstein's life. In the Season 4 finale of the CBS series The Good Fight, the plot revolves around Epstein's death. The Netflix documentary series Jeffrey Epstein, Filthy Rich premiered in May 2020. The Lifetime documentary Surviving Jeffrey Epstein premiered in August 2020. On July 1, 2020, a statue of Epstein appeared in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Footage of Trump and Epstein talking at the 1992 Mar-a-Lago party appears in the 2020 comedy mockumentary Borat subsequent movie film, where the footage is shown inspiring Borat to gift his teen daughter to someone in Trump's inner circle. Later in the film, one of Borat's children also changes his name to Jeffrey Epstein. Notes and references.